Good evening, everyone. So, good evening and welcome to 2025 ceremonial swearing in of newly elected members in the City of Peoria. At this time, I would like to introduce Presiding Judge John Tatch. I'm like, I don't see him in the room anywhere. I was like, I know he's in there somewhere. He's going to pop up all of a sudden. I was thinking he was hiding behind the podium there for a second. Who will administer the oath of office for our new council members. Judge Tatch, the floor is yours. I would ask one thing, if the families would be able to join and stand behind them as well. Right? So, go ahead, Judge Tatch.
Council members, come on up. Councilmember Stokes, Councilmember Bullock, and Councilmember Edwards.
See ya. Oh, yeah, I know.
Just right in front and wherever you want to go for pictures.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. Yeah. They're in it more than you think.
You're perfect where you are right now. Is everybody down here that needs to be down here? All right.
It's awesome.
All right, so first of all, congratulations, gentlemen, on your election. If you would, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office as a member of the City Council, City of Peoria, Arizona, according to the best of my ability. So help me God, or so I do affirm. All right, congratulations. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, that's pretty awesome to see. So great to see that happen. The first, I hereby call the meeting of January 14th, 2025 to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Beck.
Here.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Crawford.
Here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
Councilmember Nunn.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Bullock.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Our first item on the agenda today is to call for executive session. Sorry for that for everybody. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session?
All motion. Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Please vote. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. That's our first 7-0. That's fantastic. All right. Let's just keep that rolling. All right. And we will recess to executive session. Thank you. I call the January 14th, 2025 study session to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Beck?
Here?
Vice Mayor Edwards?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Crawford?
Here.
Councilmember Finn?
Here.
Councilmember Stokes?
Here.
Councilmember Dunn?
Here.
And Councilmember Bullock? Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Awesome, thank you. The only item on the agenda today is the airport site selection study update. For that presentation, I will now turn it over to Deputy City Manager, Mr. Mike Faust.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, welcome to the new council members and welcome to the crowd who's joined us for this afternoon's festivities. We're here to touch on the airport site selection. This is part of the ongoing due diligence effort to study the feasibility and ultimately site selection and impact should the council choose to move forward with an air park. For this conversation, we'll touch briefly on why an air park. We've talked about this in the past. I will very, very briefly touch on the framework for the feasibility study, which was presented to you and is now available on our website to the community. I think it was presented back last September. I'm joined by Patrick Taylor from Kaufman Associates, who has led the feasibility study and the site selection. He will walk us through a detailed review of that site selection study, and then I'll bring it back together for a closeout and a summary of that. So just at a super high level, why an air park? Again, one of the three council priorities being economic development. We're really focusing on what are the available options out there. And I think it's important to note that an air park represents an economic development opportunity. We've been looking for a catalyst for growth in the north part of the city, and the idea of an air park is not a new idea in this area, and so that ultimately led to this latest evaluation. The due diligence effort that we've undertaken has been comprised of the feasibility study, as I stated, the site selection, and then the economic development studies that went along with it. The feasibility study and the economic development studies and associated memos are posted on the city website. Under council priorities, there's a spot where we store all those documents. After today's presentation, the site selection report, the actual study itself, will be posted in that same location for the community to consume. Just want to give a special thanks to the technical advisory group. We've been surrounded by some great partners along this way. I won't go through each of them because they're depicted here, but this is no easy task to read these long documents and ask meaningful questions, and I just want to thank them for their efforts and energy to participate in helping us to present a complete view of this situation. So before we jump into the site selection, I just, again, wanted to highlight the feasibility study of it. And we're not going to go through that whole thing. I got 3 or 4 slides I'll just touch on ever so briefly. Again, this study was completed late last year. It was presented to you then and posted for public consumption. It really was broken into 3 individual components. Element A looked at what is the market, right? Is there really viability? Is there demand in the marketplace for it? Secondly, it looked at what are the airport facility requirements and how does that match up against it? And then it looked at an in-depth feasibility analysis, looking at the development process and other associated components. That was all packaged together, produced in a singular report, and the 140, 150-page report really drilled down to this one slide. A new airport in Peoria meets the threshold for feasibility. Initially, and that means it has an initial demand of 10 based aircraft. I believe the study said there was roughly 80. It filled a void in the regional system. We'll see a map here in a little bit from Patrick that actually shows kind of a hole in the northwest area where there's not an airport, and it also served as a capacity relief for some of these other airports. So when we left that one, it was very clear that there was demand. It was feasible. Now the question became, is there a site that could be selected from the various options? And for that, I'm joined by Patrick Taylor from Kaufman Associates. He will help walk us through that portion of the presentation.
Thank you, Mike. Patrick Taylor from Kaufman Associates. So we've been working on the feasibility and the site selection study for about 1.5 years, and it's our honor to be doing that. So I'm going to summarize some of the technical findings that we had from the site selection study. So first, Mike mentioned that when you're looking at the need for a new airport, one of the criteria is it filling a void or a need in the system? And this map shows that. So the black airplanes are existing airports. And there is a visual gap in the system around Phoenix in the northwest area. So it makes sense to kind of look for an airport to fill that void. When we did the feasibility study, we developed forecasts of aviation demand, which were based on new demand in the region and not taking activity at existing airports, and it was substantial. So there's definitely a need in the region if it can be accommodated. A familiar map of the city of Peoria. So when we were starting the site selection, we don't always look for sites within a particular municipality. It is certainly feasible for airports to be located outside of that municipality, typically on the periphery. But in this case, we limited the search to the city of Peoria. And so this is kind of the first high-level narrowing down of potential areas. So the red box is kind of the site selection area. Obviously, everything south is already developed, very residential, wouldn't be appropriate for an airport. So somewhere up north within the red box would make sense. So the square on the right-hand side identifies, so the black areas are areas that are excluded, so they're either developed or they're a road or things like that. The brown is mountainous areas, so that's not going to be suitable. So everything in pink is kind of what our search area looked like. And then we identified 2 particular sites to drill down a little bit deeper within the study. So the process of the analysis is a GIS data model, so Geographic Information Systems. So these are several of the data inputs, which include roadways, wetlands, proximity to transportation, surface transportation, floodplains, just the general slope of these sites, as well as other incompatible land uses like schools. You don't want to be right next to a school or church, something like that. So all of these data inputs were created or put into the model, which is on the left there. So all those bubbles and squares is the data model and how we technically did that. Right in the middle is really probably the best visual of how you do that, is you overlay all of these data models on top of each other, and the output is what you see on the right, kind of the blue shaded map. So everything in black, again, is excluded, and then the lighter colors are more suitable, and then as you go out, the blues get darker, and so they are less suitable, and the mountains are very blue, the hills over there. So we have 2 sites. We tried to, on the next 2 exhibits I'll show you is a prototype airport, 1 in each site. So this is the first site, which is actually co-located with the former Pleasant Valley Airport. So everything in red is new pavement, a new runway or apron area for aircraft parking. Yellow is new buildings, hangars in this case. And then the blue is roadways to get there. And then we're also taking into account an opportunity for an adjacent air park, so industrial commercial type development to help support the airport. So this is the first runway. It's the long-term plan. So it's a 7,600 foot runway. This is planned as a general aviation airport, no plans for commercial service. In the long term, the maximum type of airplane that you would see there would just be large business jets. And when we're positioning this prototype airport, one of the key things that we're always taking into account is to meet FAA design standards. So we want to be able to show that an airport can be located in any area that meets that FAA design standards from the outset. And maybe just to catch up a little bit, these site selection studies, which are not done very often, there's usually just a handful in the country every year because there's a large system of airports already. But there is a FAA prescribed process, and that's what I'm describing to you right now. We followed that process. Ultimately, FAA may or may not participate in that, or an airport could be built by the municipality or by a private developer themselves. But we followed the process that would allow for any of those options in the future. This exhibit also shows a couple of factors that are critical in the assessment that we did in terms of the ranking matrix. So the yellow lines are tall power lines, And you can see in this one, at the south end, it crosses the runway. So those are an issue that would need to be dealt with if you were to build a runway like this. You can also see the contour lines, so there's a large swale on the west side of this particular site, but where the runway is located is relatively flat, so that's pretty good land to support a runway. And then on Site 2, which is just to the east of Pleasant Valley Parkway, the orientation of this runway is a little bit different because of the site itself. Again, this shows a 7,600-foot runway, hangars, apron area, and then adjacent business park area. And again, those tall power lines are going right through where this runway would go. So something would have to be done with those power lines in order to accommodate this site. Just so you know, when doing these site selection studies, you never find a site that scores 100. There's always challenges for any of these site selections. So, usually it's typically an added cost to accommodate it. Another important consideration, Phoenix is a busy aviation area. There's a number of airports. Of course, you've got Sky Harbor. This is a map of the airspace in the region, and the former Pleasant Valley Airport is shown on that. So that is Site 1, and just to the right of it is Site 2. And so we need to take into account all of the potential airspace issues, because if you're going to build an airport, you need it to be usable, and it needs to be capable to accommodate that projected demand. And I'll talk a little bit more about the airspace here in just a second. This is a zoom in of that previous map with the 2-site runway center lines overlaid. And so some of the airspace issues with these 2 sites is that kind of white area that you see, that is a special use airspace associated with Luke Air Force Base. And it's a piece of airspace from 3,000 to 4,000 feet. So that could be an impact on operations at one of these new airports. Not prohibitive, it just means that pilots would have to be in communication with the Luke Tower. In fact, both of these sites, depending on the way the pilots fly, would have to talk to either Luke or Deer Valley or the Phoenix TRACON, which is the regional air traffic control folks. So it's just a busy type of airspace. We did not see any showstoppers, though. It's just a matter of communication with the pilots. Of the 2 sites, in terms of the airspace analysis, Site 1 was slightly better than Site 2. In fact, we had a subconsultant with us who specializes in airspace issues and took it one step further, which is, would it be possible to develop an instrument approach procedure to these runway ends? And that's a critical piece for an airport. It extends the usefulness of an airport to times of low visibility, storms, dust storms, whatever it may be. And so you want to try and maximize that capability for any airport. And both of these can support an instrument approach to the runway ends. Site 1 is a little bit better than Site 2, but they do kind of meet that criteria. We also looked at several environmental sensitivities potential, following the NEPA categories. And so this is basically a summary of those environmental issues. What we're showing on here is the 100-year floodplain, as well as wetlands and certain parcels that are already developed. So there's a racetrack and a substation, electric substation, and water treatment plant in proximity. Everybody wants to know about cost. That is a consideration and was also one of the weighted categories in the ranking matrix. A brand new airport from scratch can be costly. Usually the number one expense is just the acquisition of the land. In this case, we're going to also have additional expenses in relocating power lines so that the runways can go down. But you can see here there's a summary, and these are broad numbers. In fact, they might even be a little bit low, but about $150 million to build an initial build out for Site 1 and almost $200 million for Site 2. And when I say initial build out, this is a 5,600 foot runway, so that's kind of the minimum you would want to start with. There's a phase 2, which is extending that runway up to 7,600 feet, kind of the max that this site would need to support those general aviation aircraft. So in the end, we're looking at somewhere between $250 million to $300 million to build one of these two airports. So we did a ranking summary. You know, these can be done any number of ways. I've seen them done with red light, green light, yellow light in terms of these categories. I've seen rankings from 1 to 100. We've done a number of these types of studies, and I like the 1 through 5 ranking, with 5 being the best because it gives you just enough nuance between sites to differentiate certain elements. So right here for Site 1, we're showing various engineering factors, including you know, proximity to the community, you don't want to be too far, the terrain, what the earthworks would need, drainage, road access, kind of the things, again, that jumped out. So I'm looking on the right-hand side with the rank is those transmission lines. Those are a big deal and would need to be accommodated. Also is the airspace. So there's no showstoppers there, but it ranks low just because of how complex the airspace is. The instrument approach procedures are a little unusual. The slopes are a little bit higher, so this one ranks a little bit lower on that category as well. Again, Site 1, the environmental factors, so those are the NEPA categories under the factor column. And the couple that kind of jump out is both these sites are in 500-year floodplains, which we have to take into consideration, and the 100-year floodplains are in proximity, but those don't fall on the actual runway footprint. Other lower ranking piece is just the air quality. Maricopa County is in a non-attainment for ozone, so there's some certain thresholds that an airport activity would need to stay below, and could be certain mitigating options that would have to be addressed during environmental analysis prior to an airport being built. Site 2, you know, the rankings came out fairly similar. The big factors, again, are those transmission lines. The terrain and earthworks necessary for Site 2 is quite substantial compared to Site 1. There's a number of kind of ravine swales that would need to be filled in order to support the runway, so it ranks quite a bit lower in terms of just the natural terrain of the site. And then on the environmental side, again, in the 500-year floodplain, near the 100-year floodplains, so those both ranked low, and again, the non-attainment would have to be addressed as well. So in the end, the total ranking for Site 1 was 88, and then for Site 2 was 77, so Site 1 stood out as a better site. One last piece that's important to understand is once you put a runway down, that's not the only thing that it affects. It affects neighboring land use, because you need to protect that airport so it can still be used as an airport. So this is one example of a type of overlay or zoning that you might apply to a new airport. Each of these different colored shapes has a different type of regulation, including density of population. And you can see there's several of them on the center lines of the runway, so you got to protect the approaches. But airports necessarily affect what you can do with neighboring land. And that's one reason why you want to, you know, promote industrial, commercial type uses adjacent to airports, because that is compatible where a bunch of homes is not. So I think I've got that.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. So I've got a couple slides to kind of summarize the due diligence efforts. So the data clearly shows us that an air park is feasible. And I think as Patrick just walked us through, although there's issues that have to be overcome, Site 1 does support a conceptual airport. I think the power lines present a very unique and interesting challenge. And as Patrick had said, the cost with it, I think it was estimated in there about $7 million. We believe that to be very low. I think it's going to be significantly greater than that with the amount of power transmission lines that would have to be moved. But on the surface, the data clearly says an air park is feasible. Site 1 supports a conceptual air park. One thing that's really important to note, though, in the previous slide that Patrick had talked about, the first bullet and the way it reads is important. You need to apply land use policies to protect the airport. That impact of constraining development on adjacent lands is counter to the current landowner's strategy. State Land's objective is to get the highest and best use for their properties. And so by constraining lands adjacent to the airport, that is not in keeping and is not consistent with their fiduciary responsibilities and what they're trying to accomplish as an individual landowner. The implications of this would inevitably lend to some level of agreement between the purchaser for the airport and state land to maybe have to buy more land. So instead of the 550 acres for Site 1, you may have to buy adjacent lands because they cannot market them to the same group of people that they would. That's an important thing. Another big key takeaway, and although we didn't get into the economic impact analysis today, it is important to note that this study and this effort around an airport and air park was specifically about investing in a loss leader, the airport, as a catalyzing event, right? What do we need to bring properties to the market? But when we look over the landscapes of the last several years, specifically in the North Phoenix area, the installation and construction of TSMC and the associated projects, the MAC 2300 properties that flanks it, the Biscuit Flats project, the catalyzing need is not quite the same as it once was. Where the airport very clearly played a role at the very beginning of the idea, it does not play the same impact today. But it is important for us to note the significance of the IGA that this council adopted on December 17th. So just as way of reminder for the people in the audience, on December 17th, council adopted I'll say a one-of-a-kind intergovernmental agreement with State Land Department for the city to lead development efforts and installation of public infrastructure. And that public infrastructure will be reimbursed, the costs associated with it. That is a significant deal, a significant benefit to our citizens. And that effort, that IGA would have never been possible without the exploration of this air park as a potential pathway and a catalyst for our city. So as we look at the overarching theme, the feasibility study and the site selection summary, it is very feasible, and we could site an airport in Peoria. You need a minimum of 550 acres to do it for an airport and adjacent air park. It would require additional land restrictions adjacent to it. It is very important that we highlight the activation of the North Valley already because of TSMC and the neighboring projects greatly reduces the need for another catalyzing project. And based on that, the city is no longer going to pursue, nor are we marketing an airport in this area. I do want to highlight a couple of things.
You want to repeat that one more time for everybody?
I'll touch on one thing, because there is a point, and I'll touch on it in another slide. So there was really three possible ways to go about this. It was the city pursuing a municipal airport. It was the city marketing a private entity to come in and construct one. Or there's a private entity working independent of the city to construct one on their own. And I will come back and touch on that third one, right? If a private entity without the city's support came along, what would that look like? I'll touch on that in a couple slides. But I will just state we are no longer pursuing, and we have nobody on our team out marketing an airport for a private partner to come in and do it, okay? I've never gotten applause like that at a table like this. I felt good for a minute.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight, because I've heard some things said, and I think it's important to note, and we pulled this number just the other day. To date, the city has spent about $553,000 between FY24 and FY25. So there was a $500,000 line item that we did not spend all of in '24. There was a $500,000 line item that we're not going to spend all of in FY25. In totality to date, we've spent about $553,000. Why would we spend that money? Well, the math is simple. We've spent $553,000 as a city to explore an idea. And the exploration of that idea has generated a return on investment through the state land IGA of over $500 million. And the tax revenues that those properties will create in perpetuity. So let me just touch on that for a second. None of that land currently pays property tax. None of it. Because that's state land, the land it does nothing. So not only will this city be reimbursed for the full infrastructure installation, that means it has a positive reduction on impact fees, it has a positive impact on bringing projects to market. It means projects that this council had already approved in the CIP for $140 million and intended to never get a penny back, you will get all of that back and we will leverage that forward. So this $553,000 investment to return $500 million plus tax revenue in perpetuity might very well be, it's the best deal I've ever seen. So congratulations to the council for those efforts and the ideas that led to that. I do want to highlight, because we've heard folks talk about the roads being built out in the area and part of the airport. Lake Pleasant Parkway, the design and the construction is part of the intergovernmental agreement. So the construction of that roadway, including its hard costs, soft costs, design and construction, will all be reimbursed when that, as it's built, as property is sold, that money will come back into the overall deal. So that is a fantastic, fantastic investment and return on investment. I do want to touch on, though, what happens if a private entity came in and said, hey, I saw your study. It said it was feasible. It said that there was a pathway to build at Site 1. We're a private entity. We want to do this on our own. There are 3 big steps.
Can you pause on that for a second?
Yes, sir.
Kind of take a step back, just so
Yes,
everybody
sir.
understands that part of it. Because
Okay.
I think this is a very key.
Yeah, so to the point, the city is not pursuing, nor are we marketing. We are not inviting people to the city. But if somebody was to come in and they had the money and said, we read the reports and we see the viability of this, we want to go forward with it, what would they have to do to find success? What would they have to do to actually construct one? And there's 3 very big pieces of the process. And this is before you get into the difficulties of navigating the FAA. But just to bring it to market, you have a special use permit process that is governed by city code. I gave the reference there, chapter 21, 857G. It's a special use permit. Essentially, this is a public process for an overlay. Because an airport can effectively go into any zoning, you have to have an approved overlay in order to construct it. So ultimately, it would be like a new zoning case. It would function almost like a new zoning case. It would walk through that process, and ultimately, council would have to vote yes or no, should that go forward, right? So a private entity could not go forward without a council vote. That's one. Number 2, they would have to submit and receive approval through the state land application process. So they would have to approach state land and say, we see the economic viability of this. We think it's the highest and best use for your land. All of the things I described earlier that I described as a detractor, they would have to convince them that it's a benefit. So not only would they have to convince them it's a benefit, then they have to submit, they have to go through the process, they have to do the full due diligence. Then the property could go up for public auction. And that entity who came after the special use permit and wanted to build the airport would have to prevail at a public auction. So that barrier to entry is quite significant. But I think it is, and Mayor, thank you for pausing me, it is important to note that there is a pathway. It is a very difficult, and I would say next to impossible, but nothing is impossible. So it is important that we are transparent and talk to people about what it is, but I will go back to the statement of the day. The city is neither pursuing nor marketing an airport to invite anybody to this city. And if anybody watches this video, I would say, we're not inviting to go do this work. So at the end of the day, that road would be very hard to row. Okay? My last slide, and then we'll wrap this up and take any questions from you folks. Next steps. So the city staff are going to do a couple things. Tomorrow morning, we're going to put this report out on the website for people to consume. We will most likely put a cover letter that goes along with it. It might take us a couple more days for that. And I think the importance of a cover letter is when they closed the 2000 study, they didn't really put a bow on that. They didn't really explain why they didn't proceed. I think it will be important for us to clearly articulate this is feasible, it is viable, it could be done. But for these reasons, this decision was made not to go forward. So there's a very clear end to this story. Just to make sure that it's abundantly clear, There are no airport, air park related. We're not asking for more study money in FY26. We're done with the exercise. Okay? It is our goal to advance the intergovernmental agreement requirements for design and construction of the public infrastructure for the Peoria Innovation Corps. So we're going to lead the entitlement effort. We're going to advance that work. We hope to be back here this time next year with the full zoning case for all 6,700 acres. And we're intending to complete design and start construction on infrastructure projects late summer. So I would expect us to be mobilizing for construction in the July timeframe, and we're going to continue to march forward on that significant deal. But keeping in and remaining consistent with council direction, staff are continuing to pursue acquisition of land for economic development purposes in that area. Okay? And with that, Mayor, I'd be more than happy to take any questions from the council.
Councilor Edwards?
Thank you, Mayor. Good presentation, Mike. Thank you. I just have a question. So what lessons did you guys learn from this study that was different from the 2000 study?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think we've had a lot of people say, this was studied in 2000, so why do we need to do it again? I think first and foremost, we took a very different approach to it. I think the first one was a study to see if it was viable, right? Could you do it? We took a different lens. We were full tilt to go build one. And so in that, it really challenged us to understand the economics of it. What is it going to take to construct it? What are those? It wasn't just could it be done. It was really how are we going to do it? And I jokingly would tell people, I'm trying to prove how not to build an airport, because in that pathway, we were going to find how to build one. We found how to build one. But the other thing we learned along that pathway, and we've made it clear, is that by studying the economics and understanding the other effects, there's a lot that's changed, right? There's a lot of things in the space. So we learned more about airspace than before. We learned more about the interplay between catalyzing projects, right? Back in 2000, there was nothing here. There was no catalyzing projects on. Heck, the Four Corners weren't there, right? So there were no catalyzing activities, where today we have TSMC and other projects to catalyze the area. I think we also learned a lot about how to maneuver and how we would handle moving power lines and doing things like that. These are all learnings we take forward to the development of the Peoria Innovation Corps for commercial, employment, residential play. All of this learning directly applies. You know, I think as we look back from 2000, the group who led the 2000 effort, they were really looking to put Peoria on the map and have a catalyzing event to grow. I think it's important to note that the previous mayor and council in 2017, they sought a private airport at that exact Site 1 location for Amazon H2. I mean, they marketed it that way. This was a real thing. So with this group, I think you guys have challenged us to say, we want economic development, and an airport, air park is one of those. And so ultimately, I think we've learned how it's a benefit, how it's a detriment. We found people who don't like it, and we found people who do. For as many cheers as we've got, I'll get calls tomorrow, people disappointed by this decision, but ultimately, the council's objective was economic development, and I believe that there is a very clear path to economic development through the IGA with state land, through the efforts to continue to pursue land that doesn't require the construction of an airport.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jen, anything? Matt, anything? There's a button here if you guys need to. Just making sure you. Rick? Okay. Thank you for your presentation. I'll make one comment here. So out of this, just to clarify, out of $553,000 spent, we have, just so everybody in the room understands this exercise, out of this we're receiving potentially $1 to 1.5 or greater billion for state education out of the sale of all of the state land. That goes directly back to state education. That's one. Two is from taxes, fees, construction fees of everything that will be constructed on this land of the deal that we actually put together with state land is between 1.1 and 1.8 billion in construction fees and taxes over the next 20 years. $500 million of reimbursed infrastructure. It's like the city of Peoria receiving $500 million of revenue, but back from the state. Has that ever happened, Henry? It's never been contemplated until this concept. So I would make that investment of $553,000 any day, and probably, Mike, you're a finance guy, probably twice on Sundays, right? This is better than Nancy Pelosi stock trades, I think, at this point. So I think everybody would agree on that. All right, so thank you for your efforts. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And study session is adjourned. sorry. I'm trying to get your attention.
I heard it. You got it.
I'm trying to do it softly, you know? Trying to go softly for you. You're like, all right. Good evening and welcome to the Peoria City Council meeting. I hereby call this meeting of January 14th, 2025 to order. Those who are able, please stand for the invocation by Pastor James Roush from Peoria Presbyterian Church, and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I invite us to bow together. Gracious Creator, source of life, we pause for a moment to show gratitude and count our blessings for the city and its heritage, for those who served before and for those who are serving now. Lord God, for the spirit of cooperation, of hope, we give you thanks. We pray, God, thanks for civic engagement, for leaders who answer the call to service. Lord, we pray then that you would guide deliberations here and efforts going forward. Lord, that when we have healthy disagreements, that we would agree to disagree agreeably. I pray, God, that you would hold us in your care and allow your spirit of love and mutual respect for our neighbors to permeate this place now and always. And I pray it in your name. Amen.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Bath,
Here.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Crawford,
Here.
Councilmember Stokes. Here. Councilmember Dunn.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Bullock. Here. Councilor Hughes Adamshaw.
Here.
Councilor Hughes Tawari.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Awesome, thank you. If anyone would like to address the council about a matter, please submit a speaker request form, which can be found at the entrance to the room, to the clerk at this time. I would now like to recognize Councilmember Jennifer Crawford to present the certificates of newly appointed boards and commissions members. The long walk.
Try that again. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for being here. I love informed and engaged residents, our neighbors. So thank you for your time. And it's my pleasure to announce our newest boards and commission members. As a reminder, to let all of you know, these are volunteer positions. These positions are not paid. And so these people are giving their time away from their families to serve you and to serve our community. So I'd like to say that. And furthermore, if you are interested in also serving, please visit our website to look at the available vacancies and submit an application. So first, I'd like to recognize Donald Good for Parks and Recreation Board. Next, I'd like to recognize Giovanni Gutierrez for the Citizens Commission on Salaries for Elected City Officials.
Thank you. We will now move to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are routine in nature and will be enacted in one motion unless request for removal has been received prior for approval. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
All motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. We will now move to the regular agenda. To introduce new business tonight, we will consider the positions of Vice Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem. Election of Vice Mayor. Council, do we have, we will first move to consider the Vice Mayor. Do I have a motion for a nominee for the Vice Mayor position?
I'd like to have a motion to nominate Jennifer Crawford for Vice Mayor.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. We will now move to consider the position of Mayor Pro Tem. Do I have a nominee for the Mayor Pro Tem position?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion for Councilman Finn as Mayor Pro Tem.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes 7-0. Thank you. I now recognize City Manager Mr. Henry Darwin to introduce 16R.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, especially our two new council members, Councilmember Bullock and Councilmember Stokes. Welcome. I look forward to working with both of you. This evening, we have a relatively short agenda. We have before us Planning Director Chris Jaquez, who's going to present an amendment to our pre-order city code regarding, amongst other things, signage regulations for your discussion and approval. But we also thought this would be a good opportunity for us to give a general update on the planning efforts and the construction that's planned for our downtown area. And I think that's why we have Jeff Curran here, our engineering services director here as well. I don't know who's going to start. You're going to start, Chris? So please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Darwin, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year. I also want to welcome Councilmember Bullock, Councilmember Stokes. I look forward to working with both of you as we move forward. 16R tonight, as Mr. Darwin mentioned, this is a series of amendments that we're introducing to the zoning code. They pertain to the downtown area. These amendments were initiated by the city. And while they largely pertain to signage, these are efforts that are intended to support ongoing revitalization efforts in our downtown area. So tonight, while we will be having discussion and a presentation on the code amendments, as Mr. Darwin mentioned, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to provide the council and the community with an update on some of the projects that are pegged for downtown, and they're initiating activity pretty soon. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I'll make a few remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff to walk through some of those projects. In terms of stepping back and looking at city revitalization efforts, the downtown area, this has long been identified as a revitalization and redevelopment priority for the city of Peoria. Now our downtown is a familiar story in downtowns across the country. After World War II, a multitude of factors led to decentralization, where you had commercial activity, housing activity, roadway construction, that tended to bring activity outside of these downtown areas. And so for a period of time, many downtowns across the country struggled, saw some disinvestment and decline. And over the last several decades, there's been a lot of interest and enthusiasm to restore and revitalize these types of environments. They provide walkability, they provide interest, a mix of land uses and opportunities. And so there's been a lot of interest placed in those areas. Over the years, the city has reaffirmed the vision for downtown and has continually adjusted the regulatory environment to facilitate the downtown vision as a walkable, mixed-use area. The city has made investments in streetscapes, placemaking improvements in downtown, and also community facilities like our community center and Center for the Performing Arts. These are venues to bring people downtown. More recently, the city has also assumed a more direct role in assembling, abating, and repositioning smaller strategic properties into portfolio for redevelopment. So you can imagine with an old subdivision plat, you have long, narrow lots. It's more advantageous for the city to assemble these properties into larger redevelopment sites and be in a position to direct the outcome there. As you'll recall, last year, the city council approved 2 development and lease agreements that would bring 2 highly anticipated venues to this area. One is Caldwell County Barbecue. That would be on a half-acre site that's identified in blue along Washington Street. The other one is a 1.5 acre site at the northwest corner of Jefferson and 83rd Avenue, and that's being called the Jefferson House. This is a concept that is similar, if you're familiar, to the Churchill in downtown Phoenix, which serves really as an incubator space for small businesses and restaurants. It's a really cool concept. It's been very well received in downtown Phoenix. Also within the public sector, we're seeing commitments. We're seeing the private sector join in. As you'll note in the outlying area, Peoria Place, they've constructed over 412,000 square feet of employment space. We're seeing construction of over 500 units of new residential in the area. The Streamliner, which is at southwest corner of 85th and Peoria, they're under construction for 200 housing units as well. We have a new hotel, the Echo Suites, is under construction at the northwest corner of Peoria and 91st Avenue. Also, the former Smitty's property, that property has been abated. It's been zoned for a housing development there. And so that project has gained site plan approval. We've now learned that they're going to be resubmitting their construction plans for that project. So that will introduce another 200 units along Grand Avenue in the proximity of downtown. Also, we have a small Mediterranean restaurant that had submitted a site plan for the northeast corner of Jefferson and 83rd Avenue. They're going through site plan approval right now, and so we've learned that they're going to be resubmitting their plans pretty soon. So all in all to say is that these are all important variables that help to really restore, create that critical mass that's important for a downtown area and help support the demand that we hope to see in the area. So with that as introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff, and he's going to walk us through some of the projects.
Thanks, Chris. Mayor, Council, and I extend my welcome to Councilmember Stokes and Bullock. I look forward to working with you as well. This is an exciting project. Council, you're all familiar. Councilmember Stokes and Bullock will bring you up to speed here pretty quickly. Caldwell County Barbecue, Chris just mentioned, this is a project that we're investing in. We're building this facility, leasing back to the operator with the expectation that they will then purchase this at some point in the future. It's about 4,800 square feet interior, another 1,500 square feet outdoor covered dining, 3 or 4 outdoor large smokers. The permit drawings were submitted on December 26th. They are in review by my team. We are anticipating a groundbreaking, which we are going to put together a strong ceremony, a golden shovel moment, if you will, in mid-March. And then as Deputy City Manager Faust has repeatedly asked, we will have brisket by Christmas. The fine print you can't read is it may have to be delivered, but I'm hopeful.
Deliver from downtown Peoria.
Yes, that it's going to be delivered from around the corner.
Yeah, from around the corner.
So we're quite excited about this one. I think that the design turned out terrific. Our team is quite happy with the project. We are on budget and on schedule. The next one is Jefferson House, and we talked about this in previous meetings. We had an original design. I think collectively my team wasn't completely satisfied with the direction they were going. We sort of regrouped, redirected the consultant, and they've come back with a much better design that we're much more excited about. Again, as Chris alluded to earlier, this is really a mixed-use functional space, open air with a covered roof, 1,300 square feet, give or take, of bar area, some small retail space, some restaurant space. There'll be a common core area with picnic tables, integrating a splash pad, a stage for live music. We had to redo the schematic design. That is effectively complete. It's sort of what you're seeing here. Design development has now been kicked off, but we probably won't see a permit submittal on this till April, May, and that's going to be pushing it. We really are going to work hard with our consultant and our construction team. We would like this to start construction while Caldwell was under construction. That's going to be a hard push, but our expectation to activate this space is to get both these online as quick as we can. We're excited about both of these. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the City Hall front yard. You all should have received an email from Deputy City Manager Faust about our current design development on this project. We've taken quite a bit of input, redesigned this space. Again, pretty excited about the direction this is going. You should all have a pretty detailed PDF. You can go through some of the images. Part of the challenge was to keep this thing within the design budget. I think we're well on our way there. We're expecting a permit submittal in May, and this construction will start in the summer. So after we've torn down all the scaffolding around City Hall and it's all cleaned up, we're gonna tear up the front yard. But I think once this is done, this is gonna be a fantastic space. We're gonna be able to have events here. It's gonna be a much more welcoming front yard, if you will, to City Hall. Now I think we'll play a quick video that our comms team put together just to give you a good flyby on Caldwell. Turn it back over to Chris.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, that was a really great video. So now I have the unenviable position of talking about code when we just saw a really cool video here. But that's great. So, next we'll pivot. We'll talk about the code amendment that's in front of us. It's in your packet, and while it looks like there's been a lot of changes to the code, I will mention that a lot of it was largely formatting, clarification to definitions, and other things that, while not exciting maybe to the public, they are certainly exciting to those of us that have to administer the code. It makes it a lot easier, a lot more efficient to do that. I do want to recognize the project manager, Lori Deaver, our deputy director, in leading this effort, along with Sarah Dirks, senior planner within our department, leading this code amendment effort. Let me just step back real quick and talk about some of the regulatory tools that are in place and impact development within our downtown area. So back in 2005, the city recognized that we had to treat downtown differently than other areas in the city. I mean, it's no secret. The character that we're desiring, the walkability, the smaller scale land uses, very different than you might experience on Bell Road or in the Four Corners, right? So markedly different character. It's important to have the regulations aligned to support that environment. So the zoning district was developed. What you see in the dark red there, that is Old Town mixed use, core commercial mixed use. It's a lot of words, really, to say that that is where the commercial forward portion of Old Town is situated. So really around 83rd Avenue, Jefferson, Washington. That's where the main portion of the commercial downtown zoning district is located, right? The orange area, the outlying areas along Monroe, 85th Avenue, Old Town mixed use, commercial residential mixed use. And again, what this is intended to be was really a residential facing district, but with some allowances for some smaller scale and ancillary commercial uses that could possibly be part of that. But it's a residential district foremost. So that's in orange there. So those districts were developed, and then at that time, the city rezoned most of the portions of what you see to those districts. So largely when we think about the Old Town core, it's generally bounded by Grand Avenue to the east, Monroe Street to the south, 85th to the west, and Peoria Avenue to the north. So that's the downtown core district that was put in place. Additionally, in 1998, the city developed downtown design guidelines, and since 1998, we've gone through a few different efforts to continually update those guidelines. We most recently updated those back in 2022. And so we use these guidelines to review new development projects that come into the city. So we're looking at the architectural character, the fit on the street, and also the colors and materials. And so the interest is making sure that we are maintaining the authenticity of the district and making sure that the buildings respect not only the character, but the heritage of the area as well. So all of the principles that are contained within the downtown design guidelines and the policies are all intended to not only respect the character, but also to promote the public realm, and all of those attributes that lead to walkability or encourage walkability. Okay, so when we initiate major redevelopment projects, we knew at that time it's always a good time to take stock of the existing regulations that you have in place and make adjustments where they're necessary and recalibrate where needed. And so as we started to look at our downtown districts as they were, it's always also informative to look at other successful downtowns in the area. So we looked at the Gilbert Heritage District, we looked at Chandler, Tempe, and other examples, not only locally, but regionally as well. We use that as a baseline, really, to look at our regulations and how we approach things. So in this amendment, we have generally two areas that we're amending the code. These are more surgical updates that I'll talk about to the sign code, and then some adjustments to the downtown zoning districts. So particularly with the sign code, we recommend adjustments that are specific to downtown. Right now, we have a sign code that applies citywide, right? And again, back to the recognition that downtown is a different character than the rest of the city, it's important to make those adjustments that are suitable for the downtown area. With the regard to the downtown zoning districts, we've also updated, augmented the land use table and some of the development standards. And again, just to make sure that they continue to align and support the type of development that we want to see downtown. I just went over this a few minutes ago. These are, one of the changes we're making is, these district names. Again, a mouthful. I think we're gonna just simplify the terms for us. We're gonna call the dark red area downtown commercial mixed use, DCM, and then residential DRM, just for a change, or just make it a little more simple than what we had prior. So talking about signage. So what you see here are some pictures of some sign opportunities in other downtown context. Sign can be a great way or great means to create distinction in and interest in the area. So you can look at the different sign types, projecting signs that come from the building, blade signs that underhang a building facade. You see the activation of the street frontage. All these things are important to the activation of a downtown, but signage is a tool to help create and instigate that character. With regard to projecting signs, so these are blade signs, as we call them, hanging signs and projecting signs. These today, they're all one sign type in our code. They all have the same allowance, so essentially you get a bucket and you can use that bucket of sign allowance in all of these areas, but they're all part of one bucket. What the code changed in this regard, what we're looking at is with blade sign and hanging signs, we're just clarifying the definition. We're not proposing any changes to the allowable sign area or the lighting. However, we are asking for some modifications to projecting signs. These are, if you look at the bottom examples here, Joe's Barbecue, Joyride Tacos, those are some larger, interesting, somewhat artistic sign types. And so we are making some adjustments to that sign area. I'll talk about that in a second here. And so, again, these are mounted to the face of the building. They could be mounted also to a building support structure. And so what the allowance is intending to do is to increase the, first of all, the projection. Right now, it's limited to 3 feet. And so as you look at downtown, most of the buildings, they're right at the street line, meaning the right-of-way goes right to the face of the building. We don't currently allow signs to hang over into a right-of-way. So that's one thing we're looking to adjust, is to allow sign types to go into the right-of-way with the approval of a permit and a right-of-way license. So we would review it within our engineering department to make sure it's sound, it meets all our requirements, and also it distinguishes the city from liability from hanging over into the right-of-way as well. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're also removing the 3-foot projection maximum to allow for more, again, more flexibility, more creativity in the sign type. We're also allowing for an increase. So right now, you can do a projection sign at 12 square feet. Again, it's part of a larger bucket. We're suggesting that for those street sides that are abut to 83rd Avenue and Washington, the main streets, that they be increased from 12 square feet to 36 square feet. And that's a standard that we found pretty consistently through the other baseline communities that we evaluated. Now, for those sides of a building facade that happen to abut the residential facing areas, the sign area is limited to 12 square feet. So again, we want to make sure that there are any lighting considerations, any size considerations really are directed along those frontages that are the principal roadways of the downtown area. mention that, okay. And as far as lighting, so one other adjustment too is to permit neon signage within projecting signs along the main thoroughfares. And so with that, there are some operational provisions that require automatic dimming technology that would automatically adjust the sign's brightness. So it would be in correlation with the ambient lighting conditions in the area. So we think, you know, whether it's neon or LED, it's a great way to provide some interest, particularly along those main streets in your downtown area. Also, we want to make sure that if you have a sign that's facing residential, there is no neon allowance, and also that there's sensors that limit the amount of brightness of the lighting. So it couldn't be more than, we measure it in foot candles. So we require it's called a photometric study, and so that measures the light, the illumination levels. And so it couldn't exceed a certain level between the hours of 11 and 5. So we want to make sure the brightness is considerate of the land uses around, and that it's properly controlled as well. So there's a smooth transition rate. Again, as we mentioned here, there could be no, sign would not be permitted to blink, flash, or flutter. We want to make sure that it's a static, nicely designed sign, but it's not going to create lots of distractions in the area. Talking about pedestrian scale signage, so typically when we talk about these areas, these are things like awnings that you frequently see in downtown areas, you might see in malls, but also A-frames. So talking about first with canopy signs, right now, you can do a canopy sign. Again, canopy sign could not go into the right-of-way unless you've got a right-of-way license and a permit with that. So we are extending that allowance to pursue that if the owner wanted to do that. But also we want to encourage canopy signage. It's another way to provide shade in our community. So right now, when we look at a sign allowance and somebody wants to put a sign on a canopy, they can do it, but it's part of that larger allowance, whether they put a sign on the building or projection sign, it's all one bucket. So what we're doing here is we're pulling canopy signage out of that bucket and we're allowing an allowance specifically for the canopy. So we want to encourage business owners to have canopies up there. It's another way to provide distinction to your downtown and provide sign opportunity for your business, but wanted to provide a mechanism to do that. With other temporary signs like A-frames, they're allowed citywide. They're allowed to be put up during the hours of business. They have to be within 8 feet of the building. And so as you can imagine, that doesn't work really well for downtown, again, when you have buildings that are right up along the right-of-way line. So again, with the same type of arrangement, with a permit and a license, they could put a A-frame sign in the right-of-way, or rather on the sidewalk. We do have some operational restrictions there, in the meaning that the sign has to be back at least a foot back from the edge of the curb. It has to maintain 4 feet free and clear so that people are not impeded as they walk along the pedestrian routes. And also, we don't want a over-concentration of these A-frame signs at any corner, any business, so they do have to have a minimum separation of 20 feet among all the A-frame signs. And then the second part of the amendment, I talked about signage being most of it, the second part being with the Old Town zoning districts. We made a few adjustments, largely formatting, but we also made some adjustments to the updating the land use table. So the land use table is really what you can do in these districts and whether it's permitted outright or requires a conditional use permit. So we're updating a number of uses there. Some are just anachronistic. If you look at the picture at the bottom left, we no longer have video rental places, right? I think we still have
why you had
one in Oregon.
use.
I think there's one Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon. I think that's the last one.
Really?
Kind of a dying thing. So we've updated some of the land uses there, taken away the anachronistic uses. And I do want to mention, there are some land uses that have been prohibited, and we think the prohibition makes sense. Things like drive-throughs, things like gas stations, things that are more auto-oriented. And if you think about those types of uses, not only do they require lots of parking and large setbacks, they just are at odds with the character that you're trying to establish in Old Town. So those continue to be prohibited in these districts. Also, as we thought about the mixed use, the commercial areas you see in the pink there, right now it allows for commercial uses. It also allows for residential. But we thought it was important that we not have, while residential is an important ingredient, we didn't want it to consume or potentially consume particularly 83rd and Washington. So there's a new provision that says if you want to do multifamily on 83rd and Washington, it could only be on the second floor or higher. So we want to maintain that activation of that street level for commercial businesses and employment and so forth. All of these amendments, they do go through a public outreach process. We try to utilize a multitude of methods to get the word out. Legal notices, we had public meetings, we had 3 study sessions with our Planning and Zoning Commission exploring different options. We had a study session with our Historic Preservation Commission. We had an open house in downtown Peoria to talk about the downtown efforts. And then most recently, on December 5th, we had a public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission on that. And so the results of the Planning and Zoning Commission, December 5th, had great discussion. We've been having great discussion all year, but in the end, after deliberation, they voted 5-0 to recommend approval of these changes to the ordinance to City Council. So in wrapping this item up, the findings that, again, as we look at these changes, we believe that these changes not only provide for dynamic and creative signage, they continue to respect residential sensibilities. They've gotta work and they've gotta be compatible. And we think overall that this does provide and advance the area to inviting pedestrian spaces in downtown. So Mayor and Council, with that, the recommended action for 16R is to adopt ordinance 2025-01 as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilor Dunn?
Thanks, Chris. Is there anything providing for uniformity and aesthetics of these signs that project out in the area?
Mayor, Councilmember Dunn, within our design guidelines, we have provisions in there that deal with building architecture, colored materials, and I think there are some policies that pertain to signage, really about having some uniformity or some compatibility between the sign type and the building architecture, some uniformity there. But again, in a downtown context, they're usually pretty eclectic, and we want to not be overly limiting to the creativity that we see, and we think signage is a great way to distinguish your downtown area.
And the zoning district naming conventions, can you explain what that means exactly?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So our zoning districts, I put the slide up there just for a hot minute, but essentially, right now, it's just a Old Town mixed use, commercial, core commercial mixed use. It's a lot to say there. All we did there was simplify the naming convention. So that district is now would be just called downtown commercial mixed use or downtown residential mixed use. So all we did was simplify the naming conventions. The districts are still structured the same way. They still impact the same areas. We just changed the name there.
So I'm glad to see you got rid of the Old Town and are going to downtown. I think that is, it's wise and that's what we're looking for. So thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Bullock?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jeff and Chris. And I will learn everybody's name so I can properly use your last name like Mr. or Mrs. So please, like I say, grant me a little bit of leeway there. Excellent idea. So question, I actually missed one council meeting last year, and it's when you covered a lot of this on the Caldwell County barbecue. So just a 30-second answer to kind of understand, this is a unique proposition where the city is actually acting as banker and builder and then doing a lease back to a proprietor, as I understand it. Is that, what was the, just again, 30-second impetus for that? And is that something that the city sees also as a way to actually seed other development in areas that need to be redeveloped? That makes sense?
Yeah, I think from a development perspective, you know, we had a $13 million bucket, if you will, to invest in downtown redevelopment. And you have a number of different avenues. Traditionally, a city would come in and say, we're going to enhance the sidewalks. We're going to do some street improvements. Maybe we do some street lighting. And then you are hedging that the development community, the public will respond to that and come build and activate that downtown. I think the pivot by council here was, look, we want to accelerate that process and in some respects de-risk it some. So if you were to do just infrastructure improvements, say that's sunk cost, there's no reimbursement for that. We pivoted and said, look, we'll build a facility in partnership with this operator, Caldwell County, who's been quite successful, and then lease it back to them. And then they have the option and the incentive to purchase that. So in effect, you know, the end goal here is we get reimbursed, in that case, the $7 million that we fronted, and you get a much stronger activation of the downtown. You're bringing a user in that has a strong following, and so you're giving not just the perception, but the reality that downtown is redeveloping. And so that by nature is going to attract other users and other developers. So I don't know that this will be a recycling of this. I think this is a opportunity for us to make this initial investment to really energize and activate downtown, and then let development do what development does. So I think this was a logical decision by council to say, let's not invest in hope, let's activate it with a very strategic approach. And so that was the impetus behind that.
Starting working the buttons, is that?
No, that's good. No, yep.
There it is, green means on. Thank you. Again, it interests, as a small business owner myself, I am extremely excited, interested, and motivated to help small business growth in all districts. I represent Mesquite, but it doesn't matter. All districts need to benefit because it reverberates to each other's district. So I was just kind of wondering, is that an impetus, a one-off? Because a successful proprietor, you know, you're in essence trying to attract, like, please take a chance on me. I get that concept. I just want to know if that was something that you think, or maybe it's a crystal ball question. Is that going to be an impetus for more development? It's an interesting concept, that's all. Thank you.
So the original concept came from literally 36 months ago, and then all of a sudden, whenever the first 2 weeks that I'm trying to say, there's a lot of people over on this side, citywide, that we actually went and did tours of the city of Gilbert. We did 3 different tours of the city of Gilbert in the first 30 days of this administration. And we ate a lot of food and went to multiple restaurants. We had lots of coffee. Bill Pateno would sit here and say, I think you went as well. Like everybody that was on the dais at the time went. We ended up touring lots of restaurants, and we got a tour from both just the mayor Bridget Peterson that just switched out, and as well as the previous mayor, Mr. John Lewis, and he toured us around the city of Gilbert, downtown specifically. And the way that the city of Gilbert had engaged in trying to redevelop their downtown was that they realized that the only way they could get people to actually invest was that they had to invest first. And this council, there's a few of you that have been on here for quite a long time, and there's a lot of need or want to get downtown developed, but we could not get developers to actually come in and actually invest money down here. So the goal was to take $13 to $15 million. We ended up finding a range, investing in 2 buildings, and then what we would do is we would go to engage these businesses and try to get them to lease it. We would own it, so in case, let's say they went out of business or whoever that we chose, we picked very strong proprietors in this process. We ate a lot of barbecue at the same time. The idea was, how do you actually make that first investment? If we're not willing to invest in our city, who else would want to invest in our city? And that was really the business concept of it. And Caldwell stepped to the plate, and this staff drove the design concepts on what we've seen, and it's absolutely been amazing. I mean, from the signage pieces come from, I mean, I love seeing some of the pictures we took when we were over there. We have approximately 80,000 cars drive through our city on Grand Avenue, and you start looking at that, and the smell of barbecue, as you can imagine. Our job, I've said this, I don't know, 1,000 times probably up here, our job is to get people off of that road and engaging in downtown Peoria, bringing it to downtown Peoria. I don't care if they live in Surprise or Waddell or they're going to work in Phoenix. I want them to come to downtown Peoria and be able to enjoy part of downtown Peoria, pick up barbecue, head to their home or whatever it is. And what we're seeing now is, as you two can attest, I mean, we're seeing developers that are now very interested. We get calls all the time about what's it take to actually be a part of it. And I think when we see barbecue at Christmas, this year, I think we'll have 2 or 3 of these other locations already engaged by then. So,
yeah, Mayor Beck and
appreciate that. It's an interesting concept I've seen done in other parts of the country, and now seeing it happen in our own backyard.
Awesome.
Is that it lights a fire. And my question, and we'll talk later about it, is, do you believe this is enough of a fire starter, bad term to use, sorry, fire team, to actually get again, energy built up to see other larger, smaller mom and pop chain, whatever restaurants come downtown? So be interested to see how that catches fire. Yeah. So thank you, that's all. Thank you.
Mayor and Council Bullock, just one more point. The Jefferson House, I think one of the neat aspects of Jefferson House is it is a bit of an incubator space. They're going to be leasing very small storefront type spaces, small restaurants. So in some ways, that becomes almost an incubator for smaller businesses that we would hope get a foothold, and then they say, hey, I need a bigger bricks and mortar location. So that's part of the desire there.
Yes, very exciting for downtown. So, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Council, do I have any further discussion at all? No, seeing none. Council, do I have a motion to approve agenda item 16R? Do I have a second?
Second.
Please vote. And it passes 7-0. Man, this is dangerous. Lots of 7-0s tonight. Just kidding. All right. Next on the agenda is call to the public. As a reminder, each speaker shall refrain from personal attacks, foul or abusive language, and will maintain a civil and courteous tone and manner. Members of the audience shall respect the rights of others and will not create noise or other disturbances that will disrupt or disturb the meeting, please. And with that, by state law, the council is not authorized to discuss or take any action on any issue raised by the public until a later meeting. Megan Staub.
Good evening. My name is Megan Staub, and I'm a resident of Estancia, but more importantly, I'm a lifelong Peoria resident. I remember a time of orange groves for miles, a time before the Loop 101, or a bridge on 75th Avenue that went over Skunk Creek, which was one of our favorite car rides, by the way. So I've seen development occurring in Peoria and the greater Phoenix area my entire life. I don't have expectations that the desert will remain development-free. Quite to the contrary, I welcome smart development and growth. In fact, Amcor isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world if it's placed in an appropriate area. Amcor is a full-on manufacturing factory, words used by David McCann of Amcor, and he states that Amcor, quote, uses a lot of chemicals and gases, but doesn't know exactly what chemicals they will be using. First, how does a company not know what chemicals they are using in their manufacturing process? As a community, we have a right to know what may be in our water supply. Second, how can anyone think that this type of an industrial building belongs in close proximity to a school and residential neighborhood? Not only are the chemicals dangerous, but the increased traffic patterns are too. To be honest, I never liked the idea of Amcor and 5 North at Vistancia, but it was an easier pill to swallow when the building would be about 500,000 square feet and no taller than 54 feet, and that we supposedly wouldn't be able to see it from our neighborhoods. It's now become an enormous pill that cannot be tolerated. With the announcement last week that the building will now be over 2 million square feet and 118 feet in height, it is something that cannot be ignored. It will change Vistancia and not for the better. As stated by a fellow Vistancia resident, Stephanie Online, this was clearly a bait and switch and we didn't even want the bait that they gave us. Now, I know that you were gonna say, that the area was zoned for this. Technically, yes. Before Vistancia existed and before any other neighborhoods were recreated in this area. And as you guys have stated before in the most recent general plan amendment, plans need to be updated from time to time. And really, this should have been done with this particular area. We have been told over and over again that the plan for the land was commercial offices, healthcare, education. It was never in the marketing plan, at least what residents were made to believe, that industrial manufacturing was a possibility. As my mom kind of always used to say, just because you can doesn't mean you always should. Another Peoria resident stated this well: as elected leaders, you have a duty to represent your constituents and prioritize the well-being and integrity of our community. I feel your duty isn't to Amcor, it's to us, the citizens of Peoria, and that kind of just feels like that's been lost.
Ms. Shannon Semo, please. Ms. Shannon Semo.
I turned in my paper last. I wasn't expecting to go right away. Okay.
Do you want me to pause?
No, I'm all right.
Okay.
Okay, so I have been to a lot of meetings, more meetings than I've ever been to in my life. And I made a few observations, and I was lucky enough to meet with Mr. Edwards and the mayor's chief of staff, and we had a good chat. I have noticed there are a few council members who always ask questions, but I noticed specifically during the AMCOR talks and presentations that not a lot of questions were asked. And so because questions aren't asked, I'm wondering if everybody is versed in the information so much that they don't have to ask questions, you just already know the answer. Because rarely do I see somebody ask a question or like an expanding question. The chemicals that testing and packaging uses, for specifically to AMCOR, you can look that up online. ChatGPT can tell you all the chemicals that are used during testing and packaging. So I would suggest that maybe that would be a good resource to use. I'd also like to add, I appreciate all the ideas with downtown and all of the signage and everything. Everybody loves a neon sign. I do too. But those of us that know Peoria, that's not really true to what downtown was in the first place. And I feel like some things are getting lost, like quintessential Arizona architecture in the way of Frank Lloyd Wright, and I can't remember the other guy's name, and I was trying to remember it. In fact, I was looking it up when you called me up here. We're using other people's ideas to make something new and fresh and to attract people, and I feel like that we should do something that's like unique to Arizona. I remember growing up, everything was cowboys and Indians and all kinds of cool stuff. We don't see it anymore. We just don't. And so I feel like we're offering the exact same thing that everybody else is, and it's not going to attract anybody. And then my other question is, in terms of water with AMCOR, is what if you guys are wrong? Like, what if all the planners and everybody is wrong? Or what if you're right, but then it causes unexpected problems where there shouldn't be any? And so, especially seeing everything that's happened in California with the water situation and everything, I'm not comparing the two, and I'm not saying that you're not taking care of it. I just feel like more thought needs to be put into the chemicals in the water situation that we're currently experiencing and will continue to experience. Water in this state is not plentiful. We haven't seen a rain in I don't know how long, and I'm really hoping that everybody is planning ahead and thinking carefully. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mayor. Don McCartney?
Hi. I'd like to say I am not opposed to all of the new business that you're bringing in, and I love the idea of jobs. What I am opposed to, and I think the majority of the folks that live in Vistancia and also in Trilogy are opposed to, is that somehow it got approved for this facility to be put in the middle of our neighborhood. And I would ask all of you to consider this, right? We are building a new charter school. You are now talking about, and somehow it got approved, which I am amazed at, just the way in nature it was brought up in last week's meeting of kind of at the last minute, we decided it'd be a good idea, we got the space, we're gonna double the size of this facility. We're talking a 2 million square foot facility in the middle of a master planned community where the majority of us have invested all of our hard-earned money into our homes. And these homes now are being jeopardized by having this eyesore. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but the amount of time, effort, and energy that you spent on speaking to the character of downtown. Put that time, effort, and energy into the character of our community of Vistancia. You have spent more time looking at the idea of signs. We are going to have an eyesore that is so large. When the gentleman said about the noise and the water and the recycling, I think back to when the TMSC building opened and there was an issue with a truck and chemicals on the back of the truck that they had to evacuate. What are we going to do when you have a school filled with children and you have all of us in our homes? All of a sudden, we are all going to evacuate to where? I would like to understand how. How did Amcor get the okay to do this? How did they get the okay at the last minute to double the size of this facility? How can none of you care if this was in your backyard? You cannot tell me that you would be A-okay with this type of a facility being there. I need to understand how this got passed. I agree with you. What was originally presented to us is nothing like what it is. I was told that we would have hospitals or healthcare facilities, we'd have medical facilities, there'd be restaurants. Nowhere did it say that there would be this type of a packaging and testing facility put into our neighborhood. What I also don't understand is in regards to the investment. I heard about all the money that we are investing, and I love the idea. I think it's phenomenal. However, when they told us that the reason they didn't choose something closer to the existing facility that's on 303, which is the main reason that they are coming here, is because of the investment it would take for them to get the infrastructure built. So instead, they're going to come there and take care of the infrastructure that we've built that was meant for families. I would like this to be reconsidered.
Lorene Bordorf. Bodorf. Ms. Bodorf.
Hi, Mayor and Council. My name is Lorene Bodorf, and I live on North 128th Drive in the Mesquite District. Even though 5 North area has been zoned for commercial and industrial for over 2 decades, and the contract was signed nearly a year ago, I noticed that there's a lot of inaccurate information and fear floating around my community about Amcor and the motivation of city officials and staff. Like many, I moved to Trilogy in Vistancia because it was a paradise. The completion of the 303 freeway right before we moved here was a good indication that this area was going to be developed, and I found that aspect exciting. Thank you so much, Deputy City Manager Mike Faust, for speaking at the community update meeting last week. And Dave McCann of Amcor also did a thorough job explaining the process, the timeline, and the vision. I appreciate the ongoing transparency and the willingness to answer questions. Knowing that Amcor must adhere to strict Vistancia design standards, I have full confidence that the facility will be beautiful. I fully support the...
Let's pause for a second. Let's pause time for a second. So we are going to respect other people's times. I understand the emotion of it. I truly do. But we need to respect other people's opposition or opposite comments of what you believe in. Please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue.
I fully support the employment opportunities for the next generations and the ability to work, live, and play in Peoria. And I look forward to Peoria realizing its full potential. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, ma'am. Ms. Norman Reed. Norman Reed.
Hi, I live in Vistancia Village, and I have attended nearly every meeting that's been available to us. And surprising to me, the residents seem to be the least considerate of the whole process. Every meeting I go to, I find out new information about traffic flow, about the height of the building, the size of the building, the amount of water that's going to be used. And so I'm disappointed to know that the residents seem to be so far behind the curve in what's happening. My career was as a mechanical contractor, and I know for a fact, after having worked on Motorola, Intel, Micron, and other facilities, that the way that technology changes, it evolves so quickly that what works for today doesn't work for tomorrow, and there's always new processes, new construction, new chemicals being used, ventilation systems being added. And the real concern is we as residents are going to be the recipients of whatever bad things happen in our community. You talk about traffic flow. I understand that west of that facility over time will be another 10,000 residents. And we already have traffic issues out there. So I've been told that it's not going to be a concern. We've got it all under control. It's planned. That cannot be true. You can't have 2,000 employees working 24/7, plus all the trucks and the vehicles through the processes, plus the normal activities of everybody in the communities and the school itself, and not have a major traffic concern. Traffic safety and lack of transparency is a real concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Mr. John Forsyth.
I am John Forsyth. Every time I come here and I speak about this really isn't a democracy here in the city of Peoria, and I'm hearing it again tonight. A small group of individuals, citizens, some of our city leaders, and LD 28 are steering democracy away from the will of the people. It's not democracy. A small group is called a cult. In government terms, it's called fascism. Let me define fascism. It's a political philosophy, movement, or regime that is associated with a centralized, autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader and suppression of opposition. It's this suppression that I want to talk about. Now, the Republican Party was founded in 1854. One of the main pillars was diverse, inclusive thought, not exclusive. Forcible suppression. Jason Beck, last year, you tried to remove a member off this council. Out of respect, I'm going to leave it at that. But you called Brad Schaefer unethical and immoral for voting against a tax increase you wanted. Let me define some unethical and immoral activities that this city has done. You recently approved a pay increase for the city manager. His vacation pay, just his vacation pay, is greater than that of the median household income here in Peoria. It's incredible. The city's running out of money. By my calculations, you burned through $100 million of reserves in 2 years. The utility rates in this city are 4 times higher than inflation over the past 2 years. And we're shaking down businesses for extra sales tax dollars. It was the dance studios, Pleasant Harbor, now it's the car washes. Let's get back into suppression. I've been shut down twice, once by you, once by the city manager, from speaking. You said that I threatened the council. Now, when you threaten an elected official, it's a federal offense. The FBI stops by your house and takes you to FBI jail. Never happened, because it wasn't true. I've heard from current and former city employees that there's a mantra here in this city. It is, get in line or resign. So let's talk about the next mayoral election. We now have a new entry into the race, ex-Chief Art Miller. Apparently he didn't want to retire. He ran away from this city because it's unlawful and unorderly. I mean, that's a pretty big slap in the face from a ranking high member of this city. So, just not shut me down. I'm really disappointed, but I'm going to redress some more grievances at the next meeting.
Always a pleasure to listen. Lanai Harris? Lene, I always do that. I'm glad that it's
Let everyone know I'm a
still
frequent
Lene.
flyer, though. Good evening, Lene Harris. Congrats to the new council members and welcome. I just wanted to address some news that I am hesitantly optimistic about, which is the airport being squashed for now. I want to remind some of the council members, as well as some of the new people in this room, that there was a controversial CIP a couple of years ago where $160 million was defunded from our park systems. And I say systems because it's top to bottom, particularly $60 million in Paloma Park. So I would respectfully ask for this council and mayor to reconsider the CIP and the parks funding in the future, especially with all those billions of dollars that we're going to be seeing in revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize City Manager Mr. Henry Darman.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, I just have a few items to share tonight. The first is about the Insurance Services Office, or ISO. They evaluate communities and their fire suppression capabilities and award public protection classifications. Peoria recently received the highest achievable score of a Class 1. These ISO ratings play an important role in the underwriting process at insurance companies and can lead to lower insurance rates within the community. But I want to take a moment with the tragedy that's unfolding in the LA area. And I know there's probably members of the community that are wondering, how is Peoria prepared for a similar, if not the same type of natural disaster in our community? First, I want to say that we will be planning a study session in the upcoming months to talk about what we are currently doing in Peoria, how I'm confident that we are prepared. But I want to share that not only with council, but also with the community. I want to talk about how our new aviation unit plays into those efforts. Our aviation unit, our helicopter, is often considered as only a police resource. But the fact of the matter is that it's a police and fire resource. So I want to talk about how the fire department has been preparing to use that resource in our fire suppression capabilities. Also want to talk about the fact that Peoria intends to be a leader in this effort to be prepared for these types of emergencies. The mayor is planning a two-day summit for the entire valley in March to bring the valley communities together, to bring experts in from all around the country to talk about what we can be doing throughout the valley in becoming a more prepared community. This was all planned before the tragedy that's unfolding in LA, but it does give us a reason to think about what we're doing in Peoria and how we're making sure that our community is safe. So there's more to come. I know there's a lot of unease out there, and we'll be sharing that not only with you, Mayor and Council, but also with you in the community. On a much lighter topic, we are really excited to announce the long-awaited Postino Wine Cafe. It's open on January 4th in P83. This is, I think it's the final of the openings in that area to join North Italia, Blanco Casino and Cantina at our P83 complex. This is the last, as I said, the last addition to our 2-acre park that's bringing new energy to our Peoria Sports Complex. And then lastly, I want to talk about the City of Peoria and our Local First Arizona partnership, where we have engaged in a survey asking our businesses, our food businesses within Peoria, what we could be doing to support them. And what they've given back to us is some feedback that we're using to design a series of workshops designed to address their concerns or the concerns. And the first workshop, having to do with the menu design for maximum profitability, will be held on February 25th at 10 a.m. at the Rio Vista Recreation Center. This isn't the only event, but if anybody's interested in taking advantage of that event, please go on our website, our economic development portion of our website at www.peoriaed.com for more information. And we'll talk about WeRide now. So Play the video. Oh, I think I stopped it. Thank you.
Peoria is excited to announce WeRide, a new and affordable on-demand rideshare service. WeRide is a by-appointment service that picks you up at designated locations and takes you to popular destinations around Peoria. The best part? Each ride is only $2 for adults and $1 for children over 13, seniors over 60, veterans, and people with disabilities. Children under 12 ride free. Ready to ride? Here's how. Download the WeRide app, visit the website, or call the number 623-777-4330. If you are using the app or website, simply select your pickup and drop-off locations from the map. Neighborhood stops can typically be found at gathering points like your neighborhood mailbox, community centers, or other locations just a short walk from your home. That's it! Just show up 5 minutes before your scheduled ride time and you're on your way. You can pay through the app or pay your driver with cash or card. Exact change is required. WeRide vehicles are ADA friendly and seat 4 to 8 passengers. WeRide is currently available in a limited area during a 1-year pilot period. Learn more at WeRideAZ.com or download the WeRide app.
Mayor, that's my report for the evening.
Doesn't that seem way better than Pogo? Yeah, yeah. It went go-go. Yeah. Report from Council Youth Liaisons. Sarah?
So recently, the Peoria Youth Advisory Board and Teen Leadership Academy worked with Peoria's trail team to help clean up the new river trail at Rio Vista Community Park. And this aligns with our Youth Advisory Board goal of sustainability. And also, the MLK Day of Service is coming up, in which we will have some of our board members there as volunteers. Thank you.
Manya?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Youth Advisory Board will be holding another teen debate night for the 24-25 term. And we're going to be encouraging youth to join us to debate on topics, make connections, and learn more about what we do on the Youth Advisory Board. And it's going to be on Thursday, February 20th at the Rio Vista Recreation Center. That's all.
Awesome. And Mayor's report. So recently we celebrated National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day last Thursday. We honor and thank the brave men and women from everywhere that work tirelessly to keep our community safe. As a council, we will always support and equip law enforcement and public safety officials across our city, as our first charter of our city is to take the safety and well-being of its citizens first. And the men and women that are both in police, you've got an incredible one right here, if everybody needs. She's a total bulldog. I've seen her in action a number of times. And but we have an incredible public safety officials here in the city. We also are celebrating Martin Luther King Day this weekend, and the city of Peoria has celebrated that annually and has an absolutely incredible event if you have the opportunity to come down to the city. Lots of art, lots of music, lots of festivities. My favorite, are we doing the bongos again this year? She's like the most amazing. If you want to get into a drum circle, I think she had like 80 drums last year, and you would be surprised on things like that we actually get a lot of people involved and engaged, and it's a great opportunity to actually meet other people from across the city. So please take the opportunity to come down. The city manager mentioned, and we don't have a slide on this, but the city manager mentioned we have an emergency management summit is here March 6th and March 7th. We've been planning this for some time. As the chief, fire chief will tell you, I'm a constant texter over the weekends, and the police chief is sitting right next to him, will tell you the same thing. Our very first meeting when I became mayor, literally the very first meeting, day one, was about emergency management in the city. How do we actually take care of our water infrastructure? How do we take care of our needs from what we're seeing across from other cities? And how do we maintain that and take care of our public safety officials, but also how do we take care of our citizens from that standpoint? So this has been something that we've been working on for some time. We've made great strides as a city to do the things that we talked about then, but we have people from all across the country coming in to do presentations during that period of time to actually try to not only help the city of Peoria, but also engage and coordinate with cities all across the valley and all across the state. On March 6th, we actually are working with faith group leaders all across the city of Peoria, and the reason why is helping them because that's how we would actually communicate and actually try to coordinate efforts in a disaster like that. Lastly, I want to congratulate the new council members, both Mr. Matt Bullock and Mr. Rick Stokes. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with both of them, and we want to welcome both of them to the council as freshmen. What did we say, 2 council meetings? I think it was. Is as a freshman, and then it's all goes loose. I'm just kidding. We try to have as much fun as possible. So, but congratulations to both of them, and thank you for letting your family members serve. It takes as much toll on the family as it does on the actual member itself. So thank you for your attendance, and thank you for everybody's comments tonight. They are taking in, people are listening. They are taking them into consideration, and staff does listen. So thank you, appreciate it, and we're adjourned.